Have you ever looked over at your neighbor's house and wondered what goes on behind those closed doors? Maybe you've shared a friendly wave or even had them over for a backyard BBQ. But do you really know who they are? Today, we're diving deep into 3 true stories that reveal the dark and unsettling secrets lurking in the lives of seemingly normal neighbors. Get ready to question how well you truly know the people living just a few feet away from you. Story number 1. The neighbor you never knew. The sun was setting over our quiet suburban neighborhood. I've lived here my entire life and never had a reason to be concerned about my neighbors. Until last week. There was an old house at the end of our cul-de-sac that had been empty for years. One day, a moving truck appeared, and the house was suddenly occupied. Everyone was curious about the new residents, but nobody could ever catch a glimpse of them. Days turned into weeks, and we all began to grow suspicious. What kind of person moves into a neighborhood and doesn't show their face? Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to introduce myself to the new neighbor. I knocked on their door, and after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. A man in his late 50s stood there, peering through the gap. He looked normal, except for his eyes. They had a certain emptiness to them. "Hello, neighbor," he said. "I was wondering when someone would finally come over." We talked for a bit. He was polite but vague, never giving any clear answers to my questions. As I turned to leave, he invited me in for coffee. I politely declined and went home, but something felt off. That night, I heard strange noises coming from his house, loud thumping sounds. Curiosity overwhelmed me again. I grabbed my flashlight and decided to investigate. My heart pounded as I tiptoed closer to his house. I peered through the window, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My neighbor was standing in front of a wall, covered in photographs of people from our neighborhood. My family, my friends, even me. Next to each picture was a red X. I ran home as fast as I could, locked all the doors, and called the police. They searched the house but found nothing. My neighbor was gone, vanished into thin air, and he's never been seen again. We still have no idea who he was or what he was planning, but one thing's for sure, you never really know who your neighbors are. Story number 2. The secret basement. In our neighborhood, we all thought we knew each other quite well. Birthday parties, backyard BBQs. We were the epitome of community closeness. There was one neighbor, however, who never seemed to join in on the communal fun, Mr. Jenkins. The old man had lived in the house next door since I was a child. He was always cordial, but his eyes seemed to hold a secret that he would take to the grave. His wife had passed away years ago, and he lived alone. At least that's what we all thought. One hot summer night, the power went out. Everyone came outside, flashlights in hand, all except Mr. Jenkins. Curiosity and a sense of responsibility led me to knock on his door. I had never been inside his house before. When he opened the door, I noticed the house was dark, even for a power outage. It was as if no light had ever entered the place. I offered to help him with candles or a flashlight. Grudgingly, he let me in. My flashlight beam caught something unusual as I passed his living room, a padlocked door. Something inside me screamed to leave, but I didn't. He caught my stare but said nothing. Moments later, I heard soft crying coming from below. My eyes met his, and I knew. Running out, I called the police. They found 3 kidnapped children in his basement. Mr. Jenkins wasn't his real name. In fact, he had many names, all linked to child abductions across states. Story number 3. The Shapeshifter. Mrs. Thompson was a widow who lived across the street from us. She was in her early 60s, always pleasant, and frequently baked cookies for the neighborhood kids. However, her sudden disappearance made us question who she really was. I was on neighborhood watch one night when I saw a light in her attic. It flickered as if someone were up there walking around. What caught my eye, however, was a strange shadow that looked like, well, it couldn't be, but it resembled a creature of some sort. Gathering the courage to investigate, I approached her house. The front door was ajar. That itself was an invitation and perhaps a warning. I went up to the attic where I discovered something unbelievable. An entire setup of ritualistic candles and a book of what seemed to be witchcraft. The shadow appeared again, but transformed into Mrs. Thompson. She looked at me with eyes that weren't hers. She laughed and said, "You've discovered my secret, but who would believe you?" Terrified, I ran out, and from that day on, no one saw Mrs. Thompson again. A few days later, her house mysteriously burned down. Whether she was a witch or something else, we'll never know. We often think we know the people living next door, our neighbors, our community members. But these stories serve as a bone-chilling reminder that sometimes we don't know them at all. Trust your instincts and be cautious, for you never know who might be living just a wall away. Remember to subscribe for more hair-raising true stories that will keep you awake at night.